From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Hi and welcome to Space Brains, the show where we joy watch sci-fi movies and then talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey and this is Mark.
Hiya. Tonight we're talking about the sci-fi film The Beyond. So consider this your spoiler warning.
Okay, so turn back now if you haven't seen this movie yet and then tune back in.
So the first thing tonight, I just wanted to ask you something a bit different, Surrey. Are you working on any science fiction stuff?
Well, I could say I've been watching the new Star Trek Discovery. It's on Netflix.
Yep.
That's pretty good. Have you seen that?
I've not actually watched that, no.
Do you watch much Star Trek at all?
The old school Star Trek was my world, but no, not the current sort of version.
Oh, okay. Well, so the now Discovery's pretty cool. It's a prequel to the original episodes.
Okay.
So that's set 20 years before or something along those lines.
Clever idea.
As a result, they've taken the opportunity to include a number of characters which occur in the original series. We had Mudd, whatever his name is, Harry S. Mudd, who's a bit of a con man that they bump into, Kirk bumps into later on. And they've got Christopher Pike, who was the original captain of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
It was in the pilot episode, which was not episode 1. They actually cut the pilot up into a two-parter called The Menagerie, where Christopher Pike famously comes in as this weird wheelchair thing where he can only communicate via little beeps and through a computer, because he's been involved in some horrendous accident that's beyond their medical technology to fix. And he wants to go to this planet where these aliens with great big pulsing space brains can make hallucinatory realities, virtual realities that are indistinguishable from actual realities.
Yeah.
So he wants to go back there because he's like, well, I'm, an action hero rocket pilot.
Yep.
And I'm stuck. He's not even stuck in a wheelchair. It's even worse. It's more like a Dalek thing.
Yeah.
He's got no arms. He's just his head on this box with a beeping and flashing light. So he goes back there. But, so it's really quite good.
Sci-fi side note, there is a Black Mirror episode that's like that in the first season where, if you remember, there's a woman that goes back through time and we sort of go on that journey with her. And in fact, she's like a quadriplegic in the future. And she's sort of like reliving those possibilities that she could have had when she was younger. Yeah. So just a very similar note. And we don't find that out until the sort of the end of the episode.
I don't remember that episode.
Yeah. It's in the first season. Yeah.
No, I've seen all those ones. But
that's a footnote, because as you were saying that about that character, it's a bit similar.
It's good. And the thing I like about actually the main character is this woman who is the adopted sister of Spock. So she's a human woman who was adopted by Spock's parents, which is Ambassador Sarek, who's a Vulcan, and I can't remember the name of his wife, who's a human. So she's like Spock's brother, and she's been raised by Vulcans, so she's a bit kind of awkward and out of place. But the really cool thing is her name is Michael. It's just a really good name that suits her, Michael Burnham. And you might think, how do you get away with such a, like, it's a clearly male name. It's not like Julian or or Shannon or something, which can kind of go either way. It's clearly Michael, but it really suits her well because she's got that Vulcan sort of, she's not masculine, she's not particularly feminine, but it works really well, actually. It's quite good. Yeah, it's a great show. The other one I've watched recently, Maniac. You have to watch that. It's a series, 6 episodes.
Yep.
Jonah Hill.
Yep. Yeah, I know the one. Yeah.
It's kind of a comedy. It's a bit of an absurdist sci-fi thing. Have you seen it?
No, but I know the filmmaker kind of background of that. Yeah. So he's sort of known for a bit of that. It's surreal.
It's got that real. I'm trying to think of what other movies I've seen that are like, but it's quite bizarre. It involves these people having these hallucinatory journeys and lives, dealing with emotional issues and family issues and things. It's just it's very cool because it's a little bit funny in places, a little bit kind of dark and sad in places. And it's got this one of the lives are in this. Actually, the whole thing is this real retro feel.
Yeah, right.
Retro sort of 80s music. And
Okay, I'll have to check that out. Yeah.
But I mean, other than that, no, I'm still working on my other podcast, which is Exit Plan. It's more of a contemporary fantasy than it is science fiction. Although the main character, being me, basically, is somewhat scientifically minded, I suppose you might say, in his approach to the magic and the monsters he comes across. And I'm writing a novel of that.
Excellent.
But you have in the past mentioned to me that you're writing scripts for movies or short films.
Yeah.
And you've been working with your wife as well on some projects.
Yes, we have. Science fiction related, I've actually, about a month ago, finished a feature film script, which is totally science fiction, and it's basically about a scientist that discovers that nanobots are part of our world. So, he's a scientist working on the biological side of insects, and he actually discovers that, this insect he's looking at is actually a nanobot, but it looks like a ant. But when he's pulling it apart, it's a nanobot. So he sort of discovers that robots and nanobots are in our society currently, and it's a bit of a conspiracy by this big company, So I've finished that as a first draft, and then now I'm in the sort of revision stage of that.
Oh, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's totally sci-fi related. That's where I'm at with.
How are you going to get that produced?
Well, I'm hopeful to sell it, basically. That's what I want to do with it. So ultimately, I would like to be directing stuff, but at this point of my career, it'd be great just to, pitch it and sell it, really. So looking at avenues to get that out and about, either in the Australian market or in the international market. So there's some different avenues out there to submit to. So just looking into those at the moment. Yeah, but I'm still revising it first. Yeah, still got another revision before it's ready to go.
Ah, geez, the edits just keep going.
Yes, they do.
Mind you, as a person who has edited the living daylights out of a couple of books, which then end up never being released, you've got to draw a line in the sand at some point.
Yeah,
and have an end date.
There is. Yep, I've done that. With the first feature that I finished 2 years ago, my end date was like a June of that year, and I made that deadline. I then submitted it to a couple of different places. I got one little bit of feedback from one place, and then basically it's sitting there. So I know that feeling, definitely, but it wasn't. I'm happy with it as it is. Like, I'm not going to go back to it and then just move on to the next project.
Yeah,
and then just see what the future brings. Where if you have a chance to pitch it to someone else, well, then sure.
I think it is key to keep going.
Yes.
There's so many movies. We talked about Passengers.
Yep.
The script for that was written a bit over 10 years prior to being made.
Yeah, well and truly, yep.
It was shuffled about the place. It was changed and swapped around a bit, and it took 10 years before any action.
Yeah.
So,
and I went and saw Bruce Beresford, the great Australian director, give a little talk here in Perth about 5 or 6 years ago. And I mean, he's also written a great autobiography book about Hollywood called Josh Hartnett Definitely Wants to Do It. And that's what he talks about. That was such an eye-opening book, that whole thing that scripts do get passed around. Sometimes directors are associated and they're literally like paid to kind of be like, oh, you're brought on, you're going to be directing this and it's going into pre-production, and 6 months goes by and then he's like, now you're not on it anymore.
Yeah,
we've given it over to another director. Like the whole thing has changed. The cast has changed, the producers changed, and they want a different director.
Often it's a matter of they're trying to find what the market wants.
That's right. Yeah.
Or maybe the pricing of things have changed. Yeah. New technologies have turned up.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, he was a big one saying that the actors, the big Hollywood actors, can have such a play in it. Like everyone else can be ready to go with a script, and they want a particular actor, and he or she's not interested, and then it kind of just shuts down. So they kind of had all these guarantees that the thing would be made, but then that actor decides to do a different film, and then the whole thing gets shut down for 12 months. And then when they pick it back up, they're like, oh, let's just change over to someone totally different now, So it's a bizarre and complex sort of society. Here in Australia, it's much more, the traditional level of funding here is government. So it's very much like teams pitch into Screen West, Screen Australia, and then get in grants to make those films. The the private sector's involved sometimes, but it's a lot of the time in the Australian film industry, that sort of government funding model.
Yeah.
And I mean, with The Lobster, they had funding from 4 different countries.
Yeah,
you know,
Ireland,
I think it was
Canada.
Ireland, Canada, France maybe, or Spain or something by memory, and or maybe a combination of those. So, and the budget was $4 million, so it wasn't this massive budget either, you know. So, and I ended up getting Ireland chucked the funds because they were like, if you shoot it here, okay, well, we'll shoot it there.
Yeah.
so yeah.
Well, what sort of budget would you need for your film, do you think? And obviously rough.
I mean, look, you'd always like it to be a big budget, you know, 5 million, 10 million, 100 million. Passengers was 112 million.
Yeah, that,
great,
that
you know.
seemed excessive.
It did, but Jennifer Lawrence got 20 mil, so,
Yeah,
you know,
when
plus a percentage. So,
You start pulling out the actors.
and Chris Pratt was 10 or 11, so if you think about that, 110 million and 30 on actors straight away.
Just
so,
those 2 actors.
Yeah. I mean, Andy Garcia's moment at the end was probably worth 500,000.
That's surprising. I see his name in the credits. And,
That's it.
And I went back and had a look at the... I thought, but there was no one else.
Yeah,
I look
no.
at the back, he's dude with all the big beard coming out and go... So his entire acting process in that was to cock his head slightly and raise an eyebrow or something, you know, like just...
And he probably got about 500,000 for that, you know, like, you know, that, but that's what Hollywood also does, the big budget. I think anything can be made with what you've got. So you could make it in your backyard with 0 budget. But probably ultimately you probably do want about 5 mil to 10 mil to make it
Well, you need enough...
good.
You need enough to get it in the post-production because doing the actual filming and actors, you can probably find actors who will basically do it for credit and percentage or something.
Correct, yeah.
And likewise, as the director, writer, producer, you know, scrounge up a few cameras and, you know, borrow some sound equipment, you can probably...
Borrow steel beg is what they always used to say.
There's plenty of films that got around with,
Yeah.
you know, only tens of thousands of dollars.
That's right, yeah.
But then the thing is, once you've got all that footage, you need to edit it, color grade it,
Yeah.
get the sound right. If there's any CG stuff, you need to get chucked in there, which often might be the case with, you know, a bit of sci-fi.
Yeah, and that script I'm talking about, there would be a bit of CGI, and I think that's probably where some money would need to be spent, because again, good CGI is always worth it. Or how else are you going to do it? You know, robotics yourself, puppetry, whatever, but you got to kind of pull it off, don't you? But low budget can work quite well sometimes. But on that, it does make me think of the film we are talking about tonight, The Beyond, because the director behind it, major visual effects director before directing Beyond.
Yeah, I was reading that.
I did think, like, just automatically, one of the amazing things of The Beyond is the special effects. Like, the special effects are great.
You can see where they spent their money. Like, they didn't have a huge budget, but you can see where they spent it.
Yes.
You can also see where they didn't spend it.
Yes, that's right.
But I think they did quite well to make it the whole thing not feel too underfunded. You know, some films you can sort of feel that there's a few. It was the script, I suppose, or the locations were too ambitious for the funding that they had. But I think they did quite well.
Yeah, and I think again, I mean, when I watched this first time through, I just thought the special effects took us on the journey, which it had to, because we were out in space. We've got lots of different things with that space agency. You know, we've got human and robot, the humanoid 2.0, the humans 2.0. So those sort of special effects. You know, then we've got, the wormhole, you know, we've got the space debris. So there's a lot of different special effects that were required in this film, and they pulled it off. And I reckon that he probably showed his expertise in the fact that he's, you know, made, I think, looking him up, he's made about 50 Hollywood films as visual effects. He's worked for Disney. He's worked on some really big Hollywood films like the Batman series, you know, the Christopher Nolan series. Yeah. And so, you know, he's a guy that obviously knows his way around. He's been the chief editor, chief director of visual effects. And I think he probably poured that into this film in a way, you know.
Yes, he actually was nominated for several Visual Effects Society Awards.
Yeah, right.
For Planet Dinosaur and America, The Story of Us.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So, yeah, like I said, a visual effects expert. Yep. So, well, let's get into it then.
Yeah, we should.
Was this a hope, a warning, or an experiment?
I have to say hope, I reckon, because as the whole story arc progresses, he does delve into the traditional human response to aliens or a big superficial race, which is the military blowing the crap out of it and all that sort of stuff. It made me laugh a little bit in this film because you and I have talked about that previously.
Yeah.
Military, those big black things are in the sky in this film, and the military just start firing at them with their guns.
Shoot guns.
Like, literally their guns. Like, okay, I don't know. Okay, all right. Are you just going to fire a rifle into the sky? Like, all right, seems a bit sort of unprofessional, I think, in a way. But it's always that military response, that, and you and I have joked about that before. But he did dabble with that. And then even at the end of the film with the resolution that the aliens give us a whole new Earth, like Earth 2.0, that there's that sort of really nice online discussion we hear as an audience through voiceover about us, kind of like some people are like, oh, we don't deserve another planet, we're just going to destroy it. And then other people are going, yeah, but if we take care of it, and other people are, no, we'll just, it's just going to be the same. There's too many of us anyway. And even though he still discussed that in the story, I think it is a hope story because basically the aliens, being this super masterful race, came here once and then went away. So 20 years ago. And then the story is, that they're here again, and they decide to save us, don't they? So they make that because of that little hard drive, the GAD, that the human 2.0 gives over to them. They obviously flicked through that, and they realize that there's parts of humanity that are worth saving. So I feel that this is a hope story because even in our doom and gloom and negativity as society and as humanity, we have a lot of good things, and that's sort of what the filmmaker, I believe, is sort of suggesting. So I think a hope story. Yeah.
I'd have to agree with you totally.
So you think the same?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely hope.
And what was sort of your takeaway from the movie then?
My number one takeaway from this movie is that we as a species can muddle through, despite all of us sort of being basically overgrown children. And as an adult, I've invariably, even though I'm ancient and wizened beyond compare, even though you still you have a look around and go, I've got 2 children that I look after. I'm responsible for. What am I doing with a house and a car? That's crazy. Just because you've grown up to an adult. I remember as a kid, you sort of look at adults and you think, they just know what to do. They know what's going on. And when I'm grown up, I'll just sort of, no, you don't. So, my number one takeaway on this is that even though we're a whole planet full of people like that who try really hard to be grown-ups but still act like squabbling children from time to time, that we can pull through. So, which ties into the whole hope thing, I think, is sort of what it's saying there.
Yeah, I think so. That sounds good.
So I'll give you we'll give a bit of a synopsis of the movie because
we should.
We've sort of mentioned a whole bunch of things here, and maybe this is a little while since you've watched it, or maybe you've never watched it before and you just want to hear about it. Basically, I'll go through a bit of a lightning round on this one.
Yep.
A wormhole opens up near the ISS and sucks one of the astronauts in. Jim, can't remember his last name. Jim was sucked in.
Yeah, I wrote down Jim.
Yeah. And so anyway, this wormhole, and it stays there. So naturally, the people on Earth, they sort of study it and they send through a probe with a little hard drive on it, which has, it's sort of an update on the gold disc that was sent out with Voyager. If anyone can throw their minds back to Voyager, that we put this gold disc on it, which should last thousands or millions of years or something, which has got pictures of people and various measurements and a solar system. I think it's got some music on there as well.
It would have to, come on.
So there's an upgraded version of this hard drive they send through. But they don't get any information back.
Well, no, they get one from the video. Yeah. They realise that, and that's where they think it is a wormhole. Because there they get one photo after time of, it looks like there's a planet on the other side.
Sorry. Yeah, that's it. So then these big black boiling balls.
Yeah, they rock up.
They drop out of the sky, come out of the wormhole basically, and sit in Earth's atmosphere. And this kind of accelerates everyone's thinking.
Yeah, that military.
It's not like, there's just a wormhole sitting there.
Yeah.
Let's take it home. We sent a probe in, and now they've gone, we can't sit around. We don't know how long we've got. We don't know what these balls are. We've got to do something. So they decide to send humans. But because wormholes are kind of rough to navigate, they're not entirely sure what sort of forces would be presented to humans. They turn to the military for a solution. And they've got these They go to the Transhuman Research Division. That actually is a transhuman research arm of DARPA. And they have the Soldier 2.0, which is basically a fancy pants robotic body with a capsule for the brain to sit in. Yep. So the idea is to take a human brain, shove it in a robot, and bingo, you've got human 2.0.
You've got a human brain controlling a robotic body.
Yeah.
And I think they do say a couple of things like the robot would obviously be able to live a lot longer, but not forever.
Yeah, the brain will decay.
Like the brain will decay, but obviously then it is a human human brain operating a robot, so it's more intelligent than, say, a computer processor.
Yeah, the idea is that you'll be able to actually interrogate them when they get back.
Yes.
Whereas a computer will only be able to answer the questions it knows how to answer. Humans can make stuff up.
And I think they did because they do debate it a couple of times in the movie, like the idea of instead of a robot greeting these aliens, like a human actually greeting the aliens, and what type of, and then they sort of did debate that idea, which I liked that. Do you really want to send a military person? Do we want that to be first contact? Wouldn't it be better if it's like, a scientist or, because you do worry, sending the military, and of course the rules are just going to blow them up.
By movies like Contact and things, they're going, and it's a big question. Often I've lain awake at night wondering that very thing. How do you decide on what sort of, ultimately I don't think it matters too much, because chance of being able to communicate with these aliens, if the aliens are advanced enough to be able to communicate with us anyway, they won't be put off by us sending a theologian or a philosopher or a scientist or an atheist
or a soldier that wants to murder them.
I have a feeling they'd be smart enough to be able to figure out what's going on there.
Yep.
So anyway, they get a whole bunch of candidates together and do a bunch of physical tests and psychological tests. And they decide to try, before getting all the candidates sorted out, they decide to try the transplant on the first one, who has excellent brain function. His cognitive abilities were outstanding and so forth. It also helpful, I think, that he was a paraplegic. He was pointing out the fact that his body he feels trapped by his body as it is, which I think is a bit unfair. I think he probably could have had a brighter look on his life there, but that's the way he felt, and fair enough. So they transplant his brain into the robot body, and it fails.
And I've got to say, I liked that. I really liked that from a story point of view, because it was a good little twist,
Yeah, it was.
Because at that point, that I did find a lot of the science and stuff, and I know we'll talk about that, but it was like, oh wow, we can do this and we can do that and we can do this, and like they were all so confident, and they were being very thorough, which is very realistic, I reckon, but it was a nice twist that that failed, because it kind of gave it a lot more weight then, It also worked to raise the stakes a bit, now suddenly it's not just a clear shoot to chuck someone in a robot body, send them through. It's going to be a little bit more complicated, which is nice. So after that failure, they modify the transplant process slightly by introducing some of the cells. They're going to introduce cells from the donor the person who is, I suppose, the brain donor, if you want to put it that way. And then they also looked for people who are enzymatically compatible or something. It looks at the genetics. Yes, yeah.
Surprise, surprise. Well, conveniently enough, one of the prime candidates was Jessica, who was their chief space-time anomaly expert, who'd been consulting on the wormhole. And so they sort of had a bit of a debate about, do we really want to possibly kill our expert?
Yep.
But also, she would probably be a good one to send up because she'd know what she's looking at. So they do it anyway. So she and this soldier, because the military it was a bit confusing there actually, they were talking about, I had the impression like 5 or 6 or 7, all those people interviewed were going to go up, like 7 of them, like a big crew. And it wasn't revealed that there was only 2 of them going up until quite late in the piece, and I had to stop and think for a moment. But so they got a soldier who had already been transplanted, as I understand it, because they didn't want to risk, or didn't have time to do a second.
Yes.
And they didn't want to send up 2 soldiers. That's why they went ahead with the cosmologist. So they send her up with a soldier, and after a week, she returns, missing the soldier. So then the scientist starts to recover and starts to tell her story, where we learn that the soldier was somehow transported out of the capsule, where she sort of blacked out a bit during that, and then he blows up, presumably because he had a weapon. He's looking at his arm, it pointed out that these soldier bodies had weapons in them. So his weapon exploded, and that was the end of him. And she lands on a planet, and she met the astronaut, Jim, who was sucked in. But it wasn't Jim. He was controlled or in part influenced by
Yeah.
these sort of mysterious aliens. We don't get to find out exactly what happened because at that point there, the anomaly, and I'm a bit sketchy on this, but the anomaly sort of exploded what appeared to be a moon of Saturn, or maybe it just blew a bunch of Saturn's rings toward the Earth. I wasn't sure exactly what that was going on. I don't think.
I was just going to say right on that, but because they were getting her memories a bit sort of slowly, and those memories were looking a bit suspicious, or they were all a bit like confused by them at this point in time.
Like the soldier being blown
up, and they sort of, I think it was implying that it looked kind of like, oh, well, the aliens must have done that, you know, and we still have these black clouds. So the military at that point, with the vague amount of information from her, they attack the black clouds.
Yeah, everyone sort of freaks out a bit.
Yeah, everyone starts freaking out that this is the case. So the military are blowing, they're sending the helicopters and the bombs, and as we joked, that idea of just shooting into the sky. I
reckon people would do that, though.
I think so as well.
They just panic and
And people were panicking at that point, and they played on that for a few moments. And at the same time, which we were told right at the start of the story, that they were predicting that there would be this weird cosmic shower of shit. Earth was going to move into this weird energy field, and there'd be all this, and as you say, we sort of see that something happens to, it's a little bit unknown because we're showing it from a NASA cam, aren't we? Or a space agency.
It's definitely not our moon.
No.
I saw Saturn's rings there, and I wasn't sure if they're indicating
it was Saturn.
That it was the end result being though that great big meteor chunks or
we're
comets
heading this way.
We're gonna fly down and smash into the Earth.
Yep.
And so everyone's kind of quite concerned by that.
Yes, when they realise that's what's happening.
But what happens, Mark? What happens?
Those massive alien black clouds that everyone was so worried about protect us. They suddenly form a shield, don't they, over the Earth? All of a sudden, they just sprout and go out, which I've got to say I liked, because it was like, well, I was not expecting that. This whole thing, I was expecting the aliens doom and gloom kind of idea, but no, the military were blowing them up. I thought they might blow us back, but they decided that we were worth saving.
Yeah, that's kind of them, I think.
So then the thing is, after that scene, more of her memories are decoded, and it's revealed that the aliens did decide to save humanity. They weren't going to save humanity, and they did decide because of the little GAD drive, a little hard drive.
Yeah, it all came together for me at that point, where they said that they do these things, and we weren't sure what it is they do as such to keep the galaxy in balance.
Yes.
And then all these these great big rocks and stuff going crashing down, and so I went, oh, okay, so what they're talking about is extinction events.
Yes.
So the dinosaurs, for example, wiped out by comets. It's kind of hinting, or basically saying, these aliens, they just orchestrate resetting of planets from time to time, where they just sort of keep things rolling along nicely.
Yeah.
And they kind of did this too as well. So they shot down and they saved us, and they created another planet.
Yeah, and they rearrange the solar system, don't they, as well? There's there's a couple of planets that disappear, and there's more planets that reappear, and
they sort of shifted around a bit.
They shift things, so somehow they've got the power to rearrange the galaxy or the universe. Their magic, which was nice.
This was something that I got out of that, actually, was then when she returned in her capsule out of the wormhole and splashed down, Gillian, the head of the space agency, because I didn't want to say NASA, made the point of saying, we were expecting years, but came in just 7 days. And I immediately went, that's a biblical number, isn't it?
Yes,
in 7 days, that's got Genesis meanings.
It does.
And then it all, as I said, it all came together at the end there, where these aliens, kind of like God, go to smash the wicked, but decide to spare us.
Yes.
And create another Earth.
That's some
rather
deep
than destroying what we were and create. So it would have been in 7 days the Earth was created and life was formed. So I don't know if he was specifically going for that point, but nonetheless, I got that.
And the scientist that creates, just that you said that now, it's kind of like the scientist that creates the human 2.0, when she does Jessica, she says, we are literally God now.
Yes. I thought that was quite a confronting
Yeah,
statement.
I think so too.
Because Jessica's sitting there, I think she was kind of still freaking out a bit.
She was,
like,
yeah.
touching her fingers together.
And she had the issue with the voice box
thing, and what have you done? And he says, we're basically God. And I sort of thought, that's kind of rough. The person that you're being God to is kind of not necessarily agreeing with you at this point.
Yeah.
And
she's the one has sacrificed herself, like, because they keep telling us throughout that process that, well, there's no going back. You can't go back to the human body, and all your family are going to think you're dead. It's a massive. And here you are, the doctor's like, "Ooh, we are God." So yeah, a little bit ruthless on the doctor's behalf, but she works for the military. She deals with scientists. To
tell you the truth, if I was in the same
makes
situation,
a lot of sense.
I would be dying for the chance. She must have been waiting for that chance to say that.
Yeah.
Just waiting for someone to set that line up so she could say, we are God.
Yeah. And it's very Frankenstein, isn't it? Dr. Frankenstein, the idea of like building life from nothing, So yeah, she does do that. And so then just the final resolution. So the aliens have created the new solar system, Earth 2.0. So they're playing off that idea, I think, of everything being a new version. Then there's a discussion of what should we do, and then pretty quickly they decide to send the human 2.0s, like lots of them, including Jessica, because we see her in the final shot, sent to this planet to kind of start colonizing it, investigate it first. But on the outside, and we get some big flashes of it, it kind of looks like a brand new Earth, like a healthy Earth. So yeah, that was a nice sort of ending to it. And that's why I sort of was thinking that, well, it's quite hopeful, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've left thinking, because they left talking about, well, we're just going to wreck it. And they're saying we've got 12 billion people on the planet. And I was thinking, well, yeah, so if we gave half our population to the other planet, that's 2 of 6 billion.
Yes.
Which
huge.
Most people kind of think is kind of a heavy load for a planet to carry, at least under our current lifestyles. So, yeah, I was a bit apprehensive and thinking it would almost be worthwhile everyone agreeing to leave that planet alone, and maybe that would be a catalyst to make everyone actually work together to sort their shit out.
Yeah.
Because there'd just be, the fights and the squabbles, and, people are just so silly with the way they carry on like
But I mean, look, if something like this popped up, and they do say it in the film, governments were really keen to get involved, invest money and, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's very realistic to me. And
I'd hope that
here in Australia, we know what big mining companies are like BHP, worldwide global mining companies. And so if something like this appeared on the horizon, you could just see them going, yep, who's got rockets, wheels, how much does it cost to get there? What would we invest to get there? You would just imagine that there would be a lot of money thrown at this very quickly.
You could almost think of, for example, let's keep Earth that we have now as just our home.
Yeah.
And we use this second Earth then as a food source and energy source.
That's right, yeah.
So that we can then, we don't have to worry about preserving this planet so much. We've got a whole other one there.
And there will be the future society's problem of maybe when this Earth does cark it, that a few people are sent up there to live on that planet.
It's one of these things that really makes me think. It's one of those things that actually I really like about a lot of science fiction. You get these sort of questions of, we found a habitable planet that we could actually reach. I got the impression it was kind of not too much further away than the moon. I guess it would have to be further than the moon, otherwise the gravity effects would totally
stuff us up. Yeah.
But certainly within our orbit, and that makes it a lot easier to get to because and actually point this out with the trying to maneuver into the wormhole. Changing orbital trajectories is quite difficult, but they point out this planet was actually on our same plane, our same orbit.
Yeah.
Which meant that really all you'd have to do is just pop off the Earth and wait.
Yeah.
And then the other planet would catch up to you, basically.
Yeah.
So it would actually be quite easy to get to.
So it'd be within a year then, wouldn't it, at the maximum?
At the most, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, it's interesting. And I agree, like science fiction proposing these sort of ideas, isn't it? The idea of a new Earth or a new planet in our reach.
Yeah.
What do we do? Robot, crossing humans into robots. Is this something that we want to do? Is this our future? That means we can live a lot longer. These questions that science fiction stories raise are fantastic, I reckon.
Yeah, because I often wonder if we found another planet for example, that had, let's say life all the way up to, but not including intelligent life, you've always got to ask that question of, do we leave it, do the, like Star Trek Prime Directive, just let it develop on itself until something arises that can also travel into space and then we can communicate? Or is it a land grab because, but then are we just acting like some sort of, infecting agent going on conquering planets? And I think a lot of that would come down to how common these planets were and how easy it was to get to them. Because if it was pretty easy to get out there and there's just lots of planets around. Yeah. Well, sure, just...
Yeah. Take a couple, leave a couple.
What if we colonize a few hundred? There's literally billions of them.
Yeah, that's right.
There's more out there than we would be able to colonize within the lifespan of the galaxy or something crazy.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's just one galaxy. Whew. So, okay, well, we're going to have to then talk about what our relative preference is. So we've got two movies. We've got Passengers and Lobster. We've currently got the ranking of number one position is The Lobster, followed closely on its heels by Passengers, because they're the only two movies we've done. Now we've got a third one. I think it's going to be a little bit harder to place it in there. Now that we've got three. So I'm going to let you do it first, mate.
Well, look, I reckon it's been three really good movies that we've looked at because they're all so different in many ways, including style, budgets, the story structure, and even the concepts that they're developing.
Yeah, for sure.
So far in my ranking on the ladder, I've put The Lobster as number one, Passengers number two, and I think this one does come in at number three for me personally. And it's not that it's any less as good as those other films. It's just sort of my viewing experience of it. And I watched it once through and it really sucked me in and I really got into it and I was loving the sort of documentary style of it. And I liked how it kind of revealed the story and we went along. It wasn't sort of really following a main character. We had sort of many characters and I did enjoy that. And I did like the documentary style. When I watched it a second time, I didn't quite get so sucked into that story. And I think that's, for me, why it just slips into number three on the ladder. How about you? Where you send it on that ladder?
Yeah, I would love to put it between The Lobster and Passengers because of the heavy science. The Lobster, I think, in my mind, is still number one just because of its quirky, absurd nature and its extreme exploration of psychology and human society in general. It hit me in the right spot there, and I can see myself going back to watch it again later. But this movie, The Beyond, it's got a whole lot of this sort of science. I love the science documentary bit. I loved that I could sort of nerd out a bit and show off to my wife a bit. and so that was really good. The style, it was very different again. We chose these first three movies relatively arbitrarily.
Yeah, just randomly.
I just basically went through Netflix and typed in sci-fi movies.
Yep.
Picked a bunch that I hadn't seen before.
Yep.
And then we've sort of interleaved my choice with yours. And as it turned out, we've got these three, like I said, totally different story types, filming, direction, everything. But I'm gonna have to agree with you. Just under Passengers, because I can see Passengers is a little easier to watch through. So as you said, the second time viewing of it doesn't have that rewatchability because it's sort of that documentary thing. Once you've learnt, you're kind of learning the story.
You are,
rather than going for an adventure, which with Passengers, you're going on this adventure, this ride. And this one, you're learning the story. And so once you've learnt it, it's got these great concepts that you can really sort of sink your teeth into and everything.
Correct.
But watching it the second time through, the primary benefit I got out of that movie was that learning experience.
Yeah.
You can't learn the same thing twice.
There's so much, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, there's so much fantastic science in it, spoken about and revealed and, amazing technology, which I liked. But then I think that's the thing, on a second viewing, it's all being explained to you. And it's not so much maybe being revealed like the other stories are with a character revealing the world. So, yeah, I just found on that second viewing, it was just a little bit kind of, I was pushing through a bit of that information. Yeah. Some of those explanation scenes, I was just pushing through a little bit.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So while still, it's the third best one we've seen.
That's right.
That's pretty good.
And it is a good one. And you need to see films like this because the style being like a mockumentary, a documentary style, you know, it's really interesting to see films put in this position. I think, you know, and we've looked at Passengers and we looked at Lobsters, and when you compare those three narratives, like it's outstanding a director to take the risk on something like this, you know, like to do it like this. They could go that traditional, you know, the story could have been about Jessica, the cosmologist that ends up being Human 2.0, or it could have been about...
And we would have learned about her failed marriage and the estranged husband.
Right, you know, and
she would then finally get back together just enough to have a kiss goodbye.
We could have gone that path, you know, or we could have gone, you know, the head of the space agency, Gillian... and maybe because her daughter was in this story, and maybe that could have been part of it, and maybe she needed to feel a bit more for Jessica or something, and she didn't want her to go, and then she lets her go, some sort of debate like that. But so I think it was quite risky for the director to go this path, and it did really work. I mean, the first viewing I had, I was really sucked into it. You know, I'd watched it straight through. I was really like thinking, wow, you know, what is going to happen next?
Yeah, where's it going? What are they
The pace was really fast. You know, the tone of the film, the pace, even though there was a lot of explanation, for me, it went really fast. You know, wormhole, aliens, you know, there's a planet on the other side. Let's send someone. All right, we've got robots. Crossed with humans. Okay, here's a few candidates. Okay, we'll pick... Well, no, it's failed. He's dead. You know, like, we're going to pick someone else. She doesn't want to go. Okay, she's going to go. She goes. She's back. And then, the aliens are there and they protect us, and it's like the planet... I was like, wow. Like, it really was a very fast-paced, you know, story, I think, for the fact of how much was delivered. And I liked that. Yeah, I did like that.
Yeah, I think it's what would be called a hard sci-fi.
Yeah.
In that it wasn't so much about human relationships. There was a little bit of that in there, of course, because humans are involved, but it was more about the technology and how society, or how certain people would approach this technology and this space mystery. So it's quite good. And we're talking, before we started recording, actually, about some of these female-led movies that are sort of gaining notoriety at the moment. And this leads me to think of the Bechdel test. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Yes, yeah,
so
of course.
This one definitely passed it.
It does, well and truly.
More than one female character.
Yep.
They spoke to each other about important things in the plot, not about men or relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Is you've got to have more than one woman.
Yes.
They've got to have a role in the plot that isn't to be a love interest.
Yeah.
There was no love interest in this.
No, there was
no romance at all.
There was no romance.
And they've got to talk about something other than the man. And no one gets the woman at the end.
No.
Like
there's no prize.
It's all about the science.
Yeah.
It's all about the mystery and the journey and the learning. Yeah, it's good.
And I thought that was good that, you know, the head of the space agency, you know, she was a woman. You know,
Well, I noticed that the head was a woman. The main anchor who presented the news was a woman.
Yep.
The chief cosmologist Jessica
who does go.
Is obviously a woman.
The doctor.
The main surgeon was a woman.
She was a woman, yes. There was a lot of strong female characters, wasn't there? And even the Gillian, you know, it was her and her daughter.
Yeah.
And they mention the husband died, I think he was in military or something right at the start. Yeah. So there's no other man, you know, there's nothing else. So here's two women. One, the daughter's going to uni, and the other one's the head of, you know, it's like, well, here's intelligent women characters. And they don't talk about men. They're talking about their lives.
And I guess also it's not pointed out or brought up. There is no tension about the fact that they are women.
Yeah.
In these roles of authority.
It's not a theme of the film.
They're just there. They're just doing their thing like normal human beings in a normal society. And that I think also is quite nice when they do that. And there's been a few shows and movies that have done that with women and with various, you know, minorities and with various genders and sexualities. I was watching Riverdale. It's the old Archie comics thing.
Yes.
And in that Jughead character, they decided to make him gay. And the really interesting thing about that was there was not a single episode certainly not in season 1, where there was any plot point about the fact that he was gay. You know, nobody picked on him because he was gay. There was no one mischaracterized. He just was. And everyone just treated him like a normal human being and accepted that he was making out with the bikie. The bikie guy in the gang was also gay, obviously, being male. He wasn't ostracized from his gang for being gay. It's like a vision of the future. That's where the world, that's where society is going to be, where people just are. They don't have to justify that. There's no character. In fact, I think Jughead actually connects with Moose, the footy player, and then it ends up dumping him and says, "No, look, you know, you're still just kind of getting your legs. Come back to me when you're when you're properly gay," which is quite nice. You know,
Yeah.
it was a very sort of powerful moment. But this movie has done this with women. They're just doing their thing. There's no power play. None of the male characters make any derogatory comments. There's no tension or stress on it. It's all part of the hope part of the movie is that in the future we will just be respectful of people and talk to their talents or their abilities as they apply to any situation. So it's quite good.
I think so, yeah. And I mean, they're professional women and men, you know, in all those departments, aren't they? Really, and they just it's not a thing. It's not a problem.
No, they're just solving the situations they brought up with.
Yeah.
So that's quite good. So I guess that brings me into best scene, worst scene. I've got 2 best scenes and 1 worst scene. So I'm gonna start with the best one just in case you steal it. You kind of have hinted at it. It's Mickey. He's the paraplegic candidate.
Yeah.
When he dies.
Yeah.
I think it was really powerful for me because we sort of get, like a reality show, they do this quick deep dive, or a shallow skim, whatever, into him. You know, he's a drone pilot. He used to be military, as I understand it, but he's obviously had some sort of an accident. We don't know what that is. He's really distraught about losing his legs, and he's so hopeful that he's going to get his new body and get to explore and be useful.
Yep.
He's going to have a legacy, which he was convinced he wasn't going to have. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was a bit, again, he probably needed a bit of life coaching there to realise that just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't actually mean you don't have a future.
Yeah, but then that's his call, isn't it?
But that was him. He was upset, and fair enough. But he was so hopeful, and he was so sort of friendly, and he's going through his examinations, and you really got to go, he's like a really cool guy. He's really nice. He seems pleasant and happy, and he's last thing we sort of see is this being laid down back on the couch going, okay, you're going to basically pass out, and then you'll wake up and you'll be in your body. And then we come back and there's a doctor. He just goes, well, the transplant was a failure. And it's just heartbreaking. You just go,
it was.
I really wanted him to have a body and like go, woohoo, I'm free. You know, like,
I guess
like Avatar.
Avatar, yeah. I was just going to say,
like Avatar, you know, that same sort of scenario. But and because they've done this documentary style, of course, there wasn't big dramatic build up of music. There wasn't big sob stories or anything, and I think that made it so real.
It did, yeah.
And that's what I really loved about that scene. I really felt as if someone had actually died.
Yes, yeah.
You know, like almost forgot I was watching a make-believe movie, and I was actually watching the story of this process.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what they did well in that scene because it is it's supposed to be a documentary. Well, they don't have footage of it. They don't have footage of his dead body because in documentary you're not going to get access to that. You know, like the fail. We had to cut to the surgeon. You know, it's the next day or whatever it is, and him just saying it failed.
I think it's 72 hours.
Yeah, or something like that. You know, so the time has gone by, but we don't. You know, if it was a fictional film, well, the camera can go anywhere. You know, the camera can show us anything at any time. You know, so but being documentary style, well, we didn't get to see it, but it did make it a harsher reality for us as an audience because we'd just been given 10 minutes of film on this guy that we're hopeful will be a human 2.0. We're told he's the best match. We can see he's a genuine guy. He wants to walk again. We're hopeful for him. They've given us reason to root for him, so to speak. And no, he's gone now.
Yeah, it's just gone.
He's dead.
He's never coming back.
And it's our fault as well because if he hadn't done the surgery, he'd be alive, you know. So.
Yeah, I really felt for the surgeon at that point. I thought, what would you feel like? You've just gone through this process. You've told him, you've got to know him. You've told him things are going to be okay. You're going to do the best you can. And then you just got to go, well, he just died. Like I basically just killed him. You know, the surgeon just killed him. Not intentionally, obviously. It was a very difficult surgery where you're extracting someone's brain and sticking it in a robot. I mean, frankly, I'm surprised they even thought they could do it. But so that was why that was such a great scene for me because it just for the moment made me forget that I was watching a story.
Yeah.
And it was like I was watching an actual documentary. It really was very effective. So I'm going to let you do your first.
Well,
is it the same one? Or?
I won't. I'll just say on that, I liked also the attention to detail a little bit later with Jessica's surgery, because they really showed us sort of a bit of the surgery. And again, it was only a real flash of it, but the wires and the blood and them cutting and these sort of things. So I really liked, again, shot, from a documentary point of view. But I think I just really liked that, we'd call it a montage at the start of the film, being that it was just a quick succession of edits, like quick succession of shots. We're not, as an audience, we don't exactly know what's going on. So it's just a quick collage of shots there. You call that a montage, and it's the disaster. And Gillian sort of says, we couldn't have been so wrong. We thought this was going to be a different scenario. That's kind of the opening dialogue of the film. And we have these weird shots of space and people frantic and panicking. And we have military, and we have, I think there's a weird shot of someone painting or spray painting a house or something. And I was just sort of a bit like, whoa, what is this going to be about? And then it said 12 months earlier. So I just, that opener was a really good opener for me.
I think they had to do that there because there was quite a bit of build-up that had to happen.
Yes.
So that you had to get a little teaser.
Hey,
stick with us.
That's right.
Because things will get interesting.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be dry. There's something mysterious and exciting.
Yeah.
And it was quite effective there.
Yeah, yeah.
It made my wife actually pay attention.
Yeah.
Which is not to say she doesn't pay attention, but she does tend to lean more towards a story-rich or character-rich story development.
Well, again, it's kind of cutting through our attention spans as humans, because it's like, hey, look at me, hey, look at this, it's the old circus rolling into town, it's like, hey, come in here, or the old cinema experience where it's like, roll up, come on into the theatre, like you'll see something you've never seen before,
I think I could probably see a number of people being disappointed though, like thinking they're being, they're getting ready for a much, I suppose, more Hollywood dramatic movie, thinking that it's going to be
and maybe
Independence Day style.
I was just going to say that idea of aliens invading or something like that. But that was not the tone of this film once you got into it. What about a worse scene? Sorry.
No, I've got a second good scene.
You got a second good scene. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm jumping the gun.
Yeah,
there.
so Gillian had to tell everyone basically that Jessica's dead, because this is a one-way thing. They wanted to say basically it's going to be an accident.
Yep.
Jessica's dead because they're sending her off into a wormhole. I mean, goodness knows what's going to happen.
Don't know what's actually
And she's going to this top secret robot body that the military probably doesn't yet want to reveal to the world. So they're trying to keep it a bit hush-hush about it. So she has to tell her daughter that their good friend, their mutual friend, I suppose, has died in an accident. I think the actress, who was Gillian, was Jane Perry. I think she sold it really well. It looks very like a reality show style. So it looks genuine in that case, because I think many times actors in movies, and I guess stage as well, tend to oversell an emotion or oversell a scene. And I think you've got to do that somewhat to bring home a point, get it through to the audience. But this was quite good because she was lying. So she was actually looking a bit sort of guilty and sheepish, and was, would explain to her daughter, there's been an accident. And she kind of looks at the camera like it's like a lie, a tell, that she's sort of looking at the camera, like sharing this. They'll see, we know there wasn't actually an accident. Yeah. And she kind of looks down and sort of looks, a bit coy about it, because she doesn't like lying to her daughter, not because her friend is dead. And her daughter is kind of speechless and doesn't know how to take this. And the whole scene there it really felt realistic, because in my life, when I have seen people talking about difficult situations or having confrontation, it isn't people giving great big monologues, speeches, soliloquies that go off, or whatever Shakespearean sort of equivalents there might be, which seems to be very common in Hollywood. And maybe Americans do talk about that. I don't know. I've never been there. Maybe they are more eloquent in the way they present things, but not in my experience. And this was a British show as well. So it was, you imagine the British people stereotypically, and I'd hate to, lump, I don't know how many was this, 4 or 5 different countries into the one, or nations into the one. But anyway, it was a very effective thing that I thought really portrayed very well that she was not happy about lying to her daughter and trying to convert that not happy to talk to her daughter into sadness for the loss of her friend, even though she was knowing that she was going to go off and talk to her shortly after that. Yeah, so that was just a really good scene. That it really worked for me. It wasn't over the top. It wasn't too underplayed. It again really grounded that film and made it feel like it could really be happening. Because there's some other scenes there where it's a little bit over the top, like transplanting a brain into this robot body in what's supposed to be modern times. I don't know if they give a year specifically.
It's supposed to be 2019.
Yeah, so it's meant to be this
now.
Year. So it's supposed to be basically...
It was made a couple of years ago, yeah, but it's meant to be now.
It's basically meant to be modern times, and so there's a few things there you kind of go, well, they've taken some liberties there in order to progress the film, or to make a point. But this scene and that first one I was talking about with Mickey really grounded the film to make it very realistic in that sense, I think. So that's why it's the best scene. But worst scene, yes, I do have a worst scene, and that's because I was a little bit confused initially, and it is when that energy wave came and sort of destroyed stuff. It was kind of similar to a bit psychedelic, and so the effects was a bit psychedelic, and I was a bit confused as to what was happening. I was like, what's going on? You know, what's that being blown up? What there's sort of colours and swirls and flares going off, and I'm like, I don't understand. And then these rocks are coming down suddenly to Earth, and I'm like, where did that come from? Like, so if that was Saturn's ring, that's a good 9-month travel before it gets here. But I was kind of all a bit overpaced.
I think again, because the doco style, because same when Jim goes missing at the start of the film, you know, we don't see it. All we get is, you know, we're seeing his camera on his spacesuit. We're seeing I think there's a camera on the space station that's not quite right, and then things are firing up, and we got his voice telling us things, and he sort of vanishes, and then he's gone. Likewise with that scene, I suppose the only thing to excuse, again, the cameras can't go everywhere because it's not a fictional film. The idea is that, and I know it does say, what does it say? Like space agency satellite vision or something like that, you know, and we see this planet sort of disappear a bit or blow up. You can only imagine
they've put this together after the fact.
That's right. But
because they wouldn't have had this live stream. People wouldn't have been live streaming watching it because it takes time.
So, but I do agree. Like especially on second viewing, I was a bit like, what's happening right now? And then I realized that, well, at the start, Gillian does tell us that the planet will be in this weird energy field thing. And there's a really poor computer simulation of Earth kind of being in a shower of rocks or something. But they're a bit unsure what that might mean. They're just predicting that something will happen. But again, I think because we can't put the cameras anywhere. But again, it goes back to that old rule where in filmmaking that if you shoot, say, planes flying around the sky, they can be going at 1,000 kilometers an hour, and yet because all they are planes in the sky, there's no perspective. And so I think maybe that's what went a little bit wrong in that shot of the planet blowing up, is that we couldn't really see enough of it. Maybe it needed to be a further away camera or something. You know what I mean? Like it was a bit confusing what exactly happened in that exact moment. But I got it, but it was a bit like, hey, what's going on here?
I think though what it did do, though, like that's why I think that was the worst scene. But what it did do, though, is it meant that then later on the scene where the blocks, after the big black spheres block everything and save us, and we get that reveal that they do this from time to time, I got that sudden rush of epiphany. It's like, oh, okay, I see. So they claim responsibility for destroying the dinosaurs and for various other catastrophic events. And possibly this is also why we haven't heard from other aliens. Because they're just
controlling it.
They just wipe out planets every now and then. And do whatever. And so...
Because it was kind of hinted that we would have been destroyed if it wasn't for us contacting
absolutely.
them. You know, they didn't really want to keep us around. We were a second decision.
They changed their minds after we sent through the probe. They got the thing and then they went... Oh, you know, actually, these guys are kind of interesting.
We should. And we'll see. We'll keep you around a little bit longer.
We'll keep them around. So that was...
My worst scene, And I was I am a little bit disappointed by this scene because, as I said, like I was just defending it then, the rest of the film really ticked the box of documentary, mockumentary. I actually would think that this is not a mockumentary, but it's a fictional film shot in documentary style. Yeah, you got to look up the definitions of those things, but I think mockumentary is a bit more taking the piss, making the joke of documentary. This was not joking about it. It was just told in that style. But the worst scene was the fact that Jessica, who's the cosmologist, who is at this point in the story, she's deciding whether she's going to become a robot or a human 2.0 and sacrifice herself. She comes to Gillian's house to kind of tell her, and she wants to be reassured by Gillian that her family will be taken care of and everything will be taken care of. And why this is the worst scene is when the rest of the film has so painstakingly been shot as a mockumentary, this scene still is with a shaky camera in her back garden shooting this intimate scene. And I was just, it really it was the only scene in the film that kind of, I was like, there's no way that the documentary crew would shoot this. Like, why would they be there shooting this moment happening? And in fact, I think really Gillian would have probably said to them, oh, look, the cameras have to be switched off. If they were at her house at that moment in time and Jessica's rolled up, Jessica would probably say, I want to talk to you about something. And they would just cut the cameras because right at the start of the story, she does say the cameras are here it's just for the space agency. They want a record of us and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then of course this event unfolds. So we're taken on that journey, I suppose, as the camera crew are capturing everything. But it felt very unrealistic. And the more I thought about it, I have seen other mockumentaries do scenes like this better. So they might have they leave a camera on the table and it's accidentally recording, or they deliberately put it on the table and then they walk away. But the scene was shot like the camera crew were in the bushes in the back garden and they kind of punched in a couple of times on the intimate conversation. Yeah. And I was feeling really, abstract from it. It didn't really grab me, that scene. It just felt too unrealistic. And maybe we didn't even need that scene. We could have just had her say, like Jessica has decided to go, or as I said, they could have stumbled upon them, like they were in her office and they've walked in on the moment and they're talking. You know what I mean? Yeah. There could have been a couple other ways to shoot that where the documentary team capture it, but a little bit more accidental.
Actually, I also found that it was a little bit empty, her platitudes. Oh, you'll definitely be taken care of.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you ask specifics? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, basically you're going to say there was a life insurance policy on me worth X millions of pounds or something? Like, what do you mean? Because it's just, they'll be taken care of.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Like it sounded a bit insincere almost.
It did.
If I was Jessica, I was saying, in what way?
Because what are the numbers? Because if you think about it, she's working for this organisation, and we all work for big. We can work for big organisations. We kind of go, well, how much are you going to pay me? How much is my pay?
Actually, what is the
is the award?
What is the workers' comp for a lost astronaut?
That's right. Yeah,
because that's what they're claiming, is that the rocket was going up to the space station to study the wormhole, and there was an accident.
Yeah.
So what is astronauts' workers' comp?
Who knows? It must be.
You think it'd be reasonable because their pay would be reasonable, being highly trained specialists. So they'd be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so their compensation would have to be equally.
Yeah, so I just felt a bit abstract from that scene, especially when the rest of the film had done it so well. I think the rest of the mockumentary style was done really quite well. So that just sort of stood out to me. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we should probably ask our beautiful listeners.
We should.
To tell us what their best scene, worst scene was. And also, if there's any astronauts, maybe they can tell us what the workers' compensation would be like, so that in this scenario, what would your family being taken care of mean? Yeah,
so if you have a best scene, worst scene, what you thought about it, probably should let us know on Twitter, Facebook.
At Space Brains Pod on Twitter. And just Space Brains.
Space Brains at Facebook. Yep.
And Instagram.
And Instagram is Space Brains Podcast. Yeah.
Space Brains Podcast. There you go.
So they're the best ways to get in touch. Yeah. So sorry, this is the bit that you're very excited about. I know the science. There is so much science in this film. I watched this without you on my own, and the whole time I was thinking, "Oh, Surrey is going to enjoy this beast of a science film." It was great. This puts the science in fiction. This film.
Because wormholes is one of my favourite topics.
Yep, straight away, wormhole.
Because in fact, I'm putting together, I didn't mention this at the start actually, I'm putting together sort of an interview-style documentary series podcast about what it would take to create a science fiction-style spacecraft. Okay, something that could actually travel to other planets. Not a realistic spacecraft like you see, which is largely utilitarian in most. More like passengers, you can imagine something that's designed and nice and can travel. But so I've had a look at the more realistic things, graphene. Okay. So they talk about these human 2.0 bodies have graphene coating or armor, if you like. I won't go too much into graphene because graphene is just this rather exciting material that's really recent. Okay. So it's been known since 1960s or something. Okay. It's been seen as it's what graphite is made out of. Right. And carbon nanotubes and so on. So it's 6 carbon atoms in a hexagon connected to neighbouring hexagons like a honeycomb. And when you get out to somewhere around 4,000 atoms worth of these things, it's a very big... in fact, it's an indefinitely sized molecule, which is unusual. So it's a single atom thickness, and it is super, super duper strong, and it has sort of various semiconductor properties and semi-metal properties. It's got so many uses, and if you could actually make an armor out of it, it would be the strongest armor you could ever come up with. I don't know how they made quite so much of it to make a whole body out of it, because we're only making tiny little strips of it, but eventually. So that's that. And then there's wormholes. So the wormholes that I find fascinating is they're a mathematically predicted phenomenon. There's not been any observation of them, and in fact there's a good lot of theory to say that they would not stay stable, or at least not for long, at a macro scale. At a quantum level, there's this stuff called quantum foam, which would be the functional equivalent of wormholes, but smaller than an atom type thing, not useful. So these ones we're talking about here, wormholes, and I think the classic example or the description that's used is where you have a sheet of paper, and there's been a couple of movies that have done this, and they go, hey, if you want to go from point A to point B, yes, but look, if we do this and punch a pencil through, we get through. And that comes from the basic visualization where if you take space-time, which you can imagine is 4-dimensional, and it's got height, width, breadth, depth, and time, duration, and you actually represent that as a 2-dimensional plane. So you're going to cut a few dimensions out to make things easier to look at. And that in itself doesn't really make much sense either, because that would mean that everything we know exists in 2 dimensions, including time. But anyway, that aside, you've got this sheet that's like that, and if you've got lots of little dots, points on it, which are grid coordinates, if you like. And these grid coordinates can be described by an equation, which is one of Einstein's field equations. Yeah, so basically, Einstein, he says he's got a bunch of equations that relate gravity and time and position. And so you can get a whole bunch of these dots, which will describe an area. They call it a manifold, if you will. So it's sort of a connected area that each of these dots fits this equation. Right. Much like you might remember graphing in high school. You'd have an equation and you put in numbers and you draw the dots and you connect them up and you get lines. So you could do that with this equation. And under certain values for the variables in this equation, like gravity, for example, these dots will basically start sinking down and then out, and you end up with a toroidal shape, like a donut. But that donut is made up of space-time. It's almost impossible to figure what that would actually mean, because you can draw it, and they often do, in 2 dimensions, where you see, as I said, that sheet of paper with a hole punched through it. But that 2 dimensions is actually 4 dimensions. In order for this wormhole to exist, there has to be probably like 6 of them. But what they're basically saying is that general relativity has a bunch of equations. Given the right numbers, they will describe disparate parts of space-time connecting.
Yeah.
And the exciting thing about this is it's not just space, so from our planet to another planet, but it's also time.
Yeah.
So if you created a wormhole here on Earth, so you got two ends of it, and you sent one end of it away at the speed of light and then brought it back at the speed of light, it will have aged less time than the one that stayed on Earth. So it will actually appear back in time.
Yeah.
And so if you travel through the end of the wormhole that you're at, you'll appear out the other side at a different time, even though you're in the same space.
Yeah.
So you could actually have a time machine, which is, I think Stephen Hawking has pointed out that this is why it's not going to work, because you'd end up having it just explode with a feedback loop of energy going through it. But I mean, that's all one thing. But to bring it back to the movie, though, they had these aliens represented as these sort of swirling black masses. And the nice thing about that, what that implies, because they swirled through space as well as through atmosphere and so forth, is black means there's no light emitting from them. So you could imagine if they can fold space-time and manipulate like that, then they exist within these sort of pockets. And that is exactly the sort of thing you'd need in order to maintain a stable wormhole. You'd need to be able to manipulate the curvature of space-time in that fashion. And it's thought you can do this, but you'd need this stuff called exotic matter. And exotic matter is basically stuff made out of something that isn't atoms and neutrons and electrons and so forth that we know of. In other words, it's unobtainium.
Yeah.
But these guys here, able to bend a reality like they do, could probably come up with it.
Yeah.
So it's quite a nicely cohesive arrangement they've got. I don't know what sort of research this guy, what's his name, Hasraf Dalul,
They call him.
has. Yeah, I don't know what sort of research he did to come up with this, but having a look through some of his background stuff, he's quite technologist.
Yeah.
So he probably would have done a bit there, but it's quite nice to think of that.
And the wormhole thing they do, and I kind of personally love it. It's always a personal preference, is like time travel, and so there is the impression that when Jessica goes through and back, even though it's 7 days, it seems like she's got I think they say she's got 7 years of memory or something.
Or 5 years or something. Yeah.
There's a lot more data in her brain, and the ship is more damaged. We have the guy that rescues the ship that sort of says, the ship had all these black marks and bumps and dumps, like it's been gone for years, not days. And then her memory is showing up data that might be 5 or 6 or whatever amount of years.
And that would make sense in terms of this wormholes. Wormholes are they're science fiction.
Yeah, they are.
We've got them theorized. We've got the maths that shows that it's theoretically possible under very specific conditions. Some of those conditions do require a singularity of gravity, so like a black hole. I reckon black holes could in fact be where wormholes are. And they could be wormholes.
They could be
sort.
wormholes,
And they could in fact go to different universes. Universes in terms of collections of space-time, disconnected from our own.
Yeah.
Rather than that folded piece of paper you punch through, you're actually punching through one bit of paper to another.
Yes.
And there could be slightly different cosmological constant, for example, which might give an effect of rapid time. Yeah. Or it could be that the other end of the wormhole was still travelling at the same time that she did, so you've got some time dilation going on there.
Yeah. So. I did like early in the film when they said wormhole, and we've got that character who's the astrophysicist, I think.
Yes.
I think that's what his title is.
Scientific accent.
Yeah. but he says, they at the space agency, they're like, it's a wormhole, and he goes, I don't think it's a wormhole. Theoretically, but I don't think it's a wormhole. I liked that part because it's like, he's the expert on this sort of stuff, and he's saying no. And then when they were saying about sending the humans, he's like, it's so fragile. Like, you can't send a human through it, they're just going to die.
Planes in there.
Yeah. Who knows if a human body would exist, he's sort of, I liked that kind of theory that he was posing, that a human probably wouldn't make it through, which made sense also to the narrative. But again, like you're saying, has doing some research. I think he did, in fact, the science here felt
he gave enough,
real,
gave enough
to
air. he's obviously walked the science fiction line there, but
Yeah.
he's given enough reason to suspend that disbelief, to go, okay, no, you've got these bodies, they're in graphene casings, and we know that graphene is incredibly strong, and it has peculiar electrical conductivity and heat conductivity processes, and it's kind of, you kind of go, okay, there
was a lot of details. Like that's what I mean. Like with the wormhole, we're having experts tell us it's fine, and then we're having other experts telling us it's not fine. With the human 2.0, we've got the people that create, as you're saying, the substance of the suit. But then at the same time, they're saying, I remember there was that scene where she says, you might notice that it's breathing, and it doesn't need to breathe. But we've found that the brain works better if it thinks it's breathing.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's a nice touch. That's kind of, they're over-explaining this machine, because in another film they could just go, you put a brain in, it works, it's all good. And that's also why I liked, the fact that the first guy died. Like in our reality in 2019, we have these amazing, scientists and doctors and surgeries, but they don't always work, whereas in a Hollywood film or in a traditional film, the actor's transferred and it works first time. So there was a lot of this sort of explaining of the technology. And then even when they sent the spaceship up with Jessica and the soldier, you remember the space agency guy said, this rocket was intended for humans, but they're not humans. So we've stripped it. We've taken out all the technology that is needed for humans, like oxygen and this. And in fact, it's really light now. And so it didn't really matter to the narrative, but it was a nice touch to explaining the reality of it,
It gave you the reassurance that they are intending for Jessica and this guy to return.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they could load in a whole bunch more fuel and
that's right, yeah.
Which is quite important. And that's one of the big things that holds us back from space travel, is that we've got that paradox of to get more thrust to leave, you need more fuel.
Yep.
But the more fuel you're carrying, the more thrust you need to get that fuel out.
Yeah. That's why we need, space stations where the rockets can fuel up and
the interest in the moon, because the moon's got much lower gravity but it has a reserve of minerals.
Yeah, so maybe there could be a base there. Any other science that you wanted to pick on, sorry?
Just going to say that the little bit there where Jessica is considering, and she goes and has a look at the body that she's going to go into, and she's concerned about the emotional aspects of it. And it's something that a lot of transhuman discussion doesn't really go into, is the fact that we sort of go off this old, and I think it's an old assumption, that the brain is basically just a complicated computer with wiring and electricity. But the reality is our brain, and in particular our thought and emotion, is not nearly as under our control as we think. It's actually under the control of a lot of hormones. It's the hormones which kick off emotion and pleasure and distress and all of these things, which then colour the way we think and act and respond. And a lot of those hormones,
kind of responds to those things sometimes, doesn't it?
And those hormones come from our stomach and from movement and from air pressure. And so taking the brain out of the body, you're probably not going to have the same person. Even if you've got that brain working and thinking, being disconnected from the slight feeling of discomfort in their left foot, the meal they just ate that was, high fat and stuff, making them feel a little bit sleepy, or the nightmare they've woken up from, giving them an upset stomach and tight feeling in their chest, which makes them feel a bit anxious and panicky. They're not going to have that. So they would only have memories of emotions, and unless we can simulate these everyday discomforts and stimuli, and then also produce synthetically or through electrical stimulation in some way, there's hormonal responses in a truly accurate simulation of that person's original body, you're just going to have a different creature. Like it's going to be post-human, as it were. Like it used to be human, now it is something else, and who knows what it's going to turn into or how it's going to develop. Whether it will be effectively psychotic, having no pleasure or pain responses, I don't know. But it was interesting that they didn't have enough time to explore all of these things. So
Yeah.
but she did raise that question. She was concerned that she wouldn't have emotional range, and they assured her. They said, "Oh no, you will." So I'm guessing, they have synthetic hormones that they just blindside her with occasionally. Every so often, she'll just be irritable and she won't know why, or she'll just be happy. And someone said, "Why are you so happy?" I don't know. It just feels like a really nice day. Or she'll see a cute kitten and go, "Oh."
Yeah, but also I suppose, like you say, we do respond to our body, cold, hot, touch. Someone touches you, you might recall, or you might actually like lean more into it, and depending on the person or the situation and stuff. And if it is cold, that could set someone else when they fear, like they get afraid. Whereas someone else like, "Oh, cold, who cares?" But and I do think that again with the Human 2.0, like when Jessica comes in, they do that in a couple of ways. You see she really is focusing on touch, like she's touching her fingers. And then when she talks, we did speak about this before, and then they sort of reveal to us, the voice box has failed, which again is a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? As a human, like imagining waking up in a body, but your voice can't talk,
it sounds different.
Yeah, it's a nightmare, really, and then it's like, we have this robotic going on. It's a nice feeling in the film because it's that real sort of realistic. If this was real, these would be the challenges that as a human we would face, wouldn't we? So what is it like to be transplanted into a body?
Tell us, what were your thoughts about the various techniques they used in telling this story, or the camera work, or what about music? Because it wasn't much of music. I don't think there was a music score at all in this one, being that it was documentary style.
Oh no, it was still there. Yeah, there was a music score.
Totally.
I actually liked this one. The music score was very moody, and it did suit. So it can remove you from the documentary style, but no, the moody music was in this film. It beated pretty well to the drama that was being revealed. There was a sound motive for the Human 2.0. So it was a bit of a freaky, eerie sound that they added in. So a motive, of course, reoccurs throughout a film. And what did you think? And maybe if there's anyone out there listening, can let us know. What about the space agency prompt? And that was with the sound motive. There was a sort of like a dump kind of beep. It reminded me of the old school, like when we were kids, when I was a kid in the 80s, when TV went off at night and you had the colour bars and there was a beep
ABC
kind of
circle with the grid pattern and the colour bars.
That's what I'm talking about. And even in being involved in filmmaking before digital, it used to be colour bars to kind of make sure your film was on the right colour scheme for the broadcast. So again, and with that beep sound, there was a beep sound. I think they were probably playing off a little bit of, NASA and the European Space Agency logo kind of idea. This was a fictional
space agency. It looked like a compass point with the north coloured.
But did that sort of jar you at all during the film? The fact that there was like beep.
No, I know some people have complained about that. Like after the movie, I sort of looked at a couple reviews of people's comments on it, and a couple of people said that they thought it was ridiculous, but I think it didn't bother me at all. And I'm just trying to think of whether it enhanced the experience. I think it did enhance it a little bit. I think it was overused in a couple of spots, because if we were watching a documentary, they wouldn't leave that in. But when they're pulling stock footage, say, from the satellites, and they're mixing in different footage sources, during the development process, the production process, they would have, like I said, like a test pattern.
That's right.
In order to say, show up, this is what this section of film is going to have in its colour, and you can match them.
Yeah.
I did think it was a little bit odd, but at the time I was watching it,
it
didn't bother me, and it did reinforce the fact that we weren't watching a drama.
Yeah, I think for me it actually was good because it added. It was because where he placed them, it was kind of, to me, I was kind of getting that feeling that things were getting out of control, things were getting a bit lost, like a TV station. I've seen in other films, that idea of like aliens coming and invading and TV stations being switched off, and it's like people are so used to TV being on now 24/7. So it was kind of a bit more realistic to me that, okay, all these big things happen, boom, there's no more footage. So it kind of added to that idea. That's what I felt from it. And there was a sound, beep, and that kind of matched it. He really used some real footage in the film as well. So there was some real space footage. There was some real astronaut footage.
It was really mixed in there.
That's what what I was going to say, is that not only sometimes we can use that and it's a bit abstract, but it was mixed very well. Again, I think being the fact that his background is visual effects, he knows what he's doing there, so, and that whole landing, in the ocean and that was stock footage. So, he really mixed that in very well, I thought.
Yeah.
So for a lower budget film to use that kind of footage and get away with it, great.
Because a lot of times I've seen that stock footage being used in films, and it's often of a lower quality and a lower grade.
Yeah.
And they often do it with riots.
Yes.
The zombie apocalypse is broken out and they show quick little news flashes.
That's right.
And they're just sort of reusing old riot footage from...
And there was riot footage in this film, but it seemed to match. It was kind of a bit abstract. The people were in red shirts and they were kind of throwing things at a military thing. And
because I think that the whole rest of the footage, because it was keeping it documentary style, was kept at a television quality. So a lot of this stock footage he was using, it was easy to blend it in there. Without it looking like it was obviously going to stock footage.
Yeah.
It looked like... And in the cases where it kind of was a bit stock, it was done as stock footage. And because it's a documentary, they're trying to pull up
maybe
suitable
that's why
vision.
It paid off. Yeah.
Because you don't capture everything in a documentary. No. Sometimes you go, well, we don't know what happened there, but here's a picture of something like it.
Yeah. That's right. So I think that worked well. They chose good stock footage and news footage and stuff for those scenes. As I said, there's space, etc. And I mean, I suppose overall we've already talked about it, but the documentary / mockumentary style, it worked. And I think it's, has made an effort to make something different. And when these last couple of episodes looking at passengers, looking at not lobsters, the lobster. Yeah, that's right. Got it on the brain now. But looking at those films traditionally shot, and then you look at something like this, it's like, oh, okay, story can surprise you. A film can surprise you. I had no expectations of the style of this film, so sitting down just watching it the first time, I was like, oh, okay, oh wow, okay, all right, it's a documentary, right?
And I think that's an important part of why we're doing this. And I'd certainly encourage anyone who's watching along with us, is I purposely avoid looking at any critical reviews.
Yeah, definitely.
I in fact have avoided trailers.
Yep.
For any of this, and I look at just the brief sort of one sentence thing saying what it is, and I go in that way, and this is what we term joy watching, where you're going with the intention of enjoying the film.
Correct.
You don't go in there with expectations of it being any particular way, because if you expected The Beyond to be Independence Day, then you'd be
totally disappointed.
You'd be going, well, that's not what I wanted. I wanted aliens blowing up big buildings. Or if you thought, The Passengers was going to be Titanic in space, again, you'd be disappointed.
You would be.
So it is something I've gone in with these three films of just open mind, intent to enjoy, and don't read what other people have said about it, because that will colour what you say, what you see anyway. And hopefully this pays off, because I've got a couple of films coming up that I have seen before a while ago, but there's most of them I haven't seen before.
Yeah.
So it'll be good. It's a good way of making sure I enjoy them.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so I'm a incredibly intelligent and extremely beautiful listener of Space Brains, which is all of our listeners are.
All of our listeners are, yes.
It's well-known fact. In fact, it's documented heavily. It's the greatest listeners we've ever had. What should I look at? What should I watch in order to be prepared for next episode?
So the next film
what's the next film?
The next film is Equals. So that's the show, I think, for tonight, Surrey. It's been great talking about The Beyond. I really enjoyed it. Different type of science fiction film. Check it out. Let us know what you think. We'll say goodbye.
See ya.